hello PSA Spain from just across the border but still on the Iberian Peninsula. Now, as you can see, I'm not doing share screen. You just need to pin me on your Zoom so that you'll be able to see the slides that I have coming along. So the presentation that I'm going to do today, I intended to do as a fireside chat because we've all seen talking heads before, and a lot of people will come and speak to an association and do their shtick, and you go, yeah, that was interesting, but what am I going to take away from that? So I've set some intentions for today. And let me just make this a bit bigger so we can all read it. By the way, that's Magoito Beach. That's not my Vespa. I used to own a Vespa. That's not my Vespa. But that's Magoito Beach. That's 15 minutes from my house. That's my walk in the morning. So on my walk in the mornings, I set my intentions. And my intention today is, one, to share a bit of my journey. As Jessica said, I've been doing this a long time. And I'm going to answer your questions and I'm going to focus questions on platform skills, virtual speaking, and coaching skills. And my third, because it's always good to have a rule of three, my third thing that I want to do today is I'd like to make some new friends. So hello everybody, and I'm just across the border, so connect with me on LinkedIn like Jessica did, and let's have a conversation. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you a clip from a speech I did to Asia professional speakers in 2019. Now, my intent in sharing this is multifold. My intent here is, firstly, I get to show you I can speak on a stage, because I don't get a lot of opportunity to demonstrate that these days. Secondly, I want you to really pay attention to the opening. Now, speaking at a speakers convention in front of your peers is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many of my professional speaking colleagues, one of the toughest gigs. Because everybody's sitting in the audience going, why didn't they choose me to speak at this conference? And I could do that better, right? So they're a tough audience. And this speech is early in the morning on day 2. And I set that frame for you because you're going to wonder why I come in raising the energy, realizing that they'd had a party the night before. I am the opening speaker of day 2, and that is a keynote spot, and it's a tough one to have. And I said, I don't want it. And they said, well, we want you to do it because you're the man for that. And so they played to my ego, and I agreed to do it. So as you watch it, I'm only going to show you a few minutes of this speech. I want you to put your critical hat on. I want you to look at what I do, what I don't do, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A around why I set up the speech this way. It also introduces you to how did I start speaking, and that was a number of the questions that came through on the WhatsApp. Did I do a free gig? How did I get my first speaking gig 20 plus years ago? So that is answered in this clip. So I want you to really, really pay attention. Are you ready? Very good. Let me take you back to 1999. It's early morning. I can smell the coffee, which is not surprising because I'm standing in a cafe. I don't feel like coffee. I don't feel like breakfast. In fact, I feel sick. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell have I done? A few months earlier, I had seen a professional speaker at a convention. And I thought to myself, I could do that. And then I uttered the immortal words, how hard could it be? Would you say that with me? How hard could it be? Back to the cafe. People are walking in, they're taking their seats, they're drinking their coffee, they're waiting for breakfast. Breakfast and a speech. And the speaker was me. You see, I had realized that nobody books a speaker until they have been seen, and you don't get seen unless you've been booked.
and I had a genius idea. I would book myself. I booked out a cafe and I sold tickets to my first ever speech. This is my first piece of speaker marketing. It was a postcard. Do you remember postcards? Yeah, some of us are old enough to remember postcards. And by the way, that is me with hair. This is my first ever speech, and I sold out. Was it a good speech? Probably not. I had overconfidence that at least got me started. But I also had the self-awareness to know that I could get better, at least to not feel like throwing up before I spoke.
All right. So, quiz time. You can write it in the chat, or you can put on the wavy icon and say you want to speak. What did you notice, wearing your critical hat around speaking, about how did I set up that keynote speech? So anybody want to be first to contribute their observations? And there's, by the way, of course, as per all facilitation, there are no wrong answers. Okay. Creating empathy, says Marianella. How did I create empathy? Be a little bit. Marianella, I invite you to turn on your video and unmute yourself and tell me, or tell everybody, how did I do that? Because one of the questions that we had is, how do we connect with the audience? Right? All right.
I don't know what was all about, but I understand, because when you said this question, they were aligning to your, they were reacting like if they felt the same, or like they know this feeling.
What was the question, Marianella? What was the question?
How difficult this could be.
How hard could it be? All right, I put it there on the slide there. How hard could it be? Now, in speaking, this is a repeated phrase. Now, I did that for the next 6 months at every APSS event. People were saying, how hard could it be? It stuck like an earworm, like a song you can't get out of your head, because it connected to where every new speaker is, right at the beginning of the journey. So absolutely great for spotting that. Every new speaker thinks, I saw somebody speak, they get paid, they get flown around the world, I could do that. How hard could it be? And I think that's resonated with a lot of us whenever we start something new. How hard could it be? Fantastic. Thank you, Marianella. Please mute yourself. Tulia has written 3 things you ask the audience to repeat something with you to frame how hard it could be. And the lady said, I had the overconfidence to get started. Yeah, I did that. Why do you think I said that, Tulia? Do you want to unmute and tell me why you think I said that?
I think you said that because most people at this stage are, they lack the confidence. They believe they cannot do it. You said in a way that you had overconfidence, but not saying in an arrogant way, because also after you said, but you had something like, I had the awareness to know that I could improve. For me, was saying to them, okay, you need to have this push of yourself to get started, but always knowing that you have to learn.
Very good. Thank you very much. Yes, because whenever we set up an audience as a speaker or a trainer or a facilitator or as a coach, it's not about us. It's never about us. We could have climbed Mount Everest. We could have invaded a foreign country. We could have had a #1 hit record. We could have won a gold medal for our country. But the audience still wants to know, what can I learn from this? What state of mind do I need to be in? What actions do I need to take to move forwards? So if we tell our own story, right, and this is a story about my first speech, it has to resonate that there is a message in it for the person. You never tell a story, or you should never tell a story, unless there is a clear message for the audience. Now, we hear as speakers, oh, we need to tell stories. So people tell stories, but some of the stories you listen to from stage is like, Yeah, that's great, but why did you tell that story? What's the message for me? So this clearly sets up learning, and it clearly sets up that we shouldn't set out for perfection, right? It's progress over perfection, because speaking, you have to put yourself out there, and your first efforts may not actually be that great. So great observation. Kim A. Page, I'd like to add my observation. Please, you can do that.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, I think it's such a brilliant thing that you're doing there. And thank you for being here with us, because you know that you are potentially being evaluated by fellow speakers. So what do? You lay yourself completely flat. And you go to your most vulnerable beginning point where nobody really can judge you. I think it's just fantastic. It's brilliant. Because for me, it's like the psychology of, I mean, what I do if I have, not in a keynote, but if I have a training or a session that's more relaxed and I anticipate that somebody maybe knows more than I do about the topic, I start out by asking, what do you know about XYZ? And then I say, I really welcome your input, so that I make them my allies, because I know if not, they're going to sit and judge me. I know that already. We all hate looking at somebody who knows more than we do ourselves. And so I just find that the way you do this in the keynote format is really brilliant.
Well, thank you very much. One of the questions that keeps coming up on the WhatsApp is, how do you get booked by speakers bureaus? And I will address that. But I want to just make this point, and it was actually shared by Frederick Harren. If you don't know Frederick, he's a Swedish speaker, but he also was a president of Professional I can't even say it myself. Asia Professional Speakers Singapore. He followed me. He's a close friend of mine. And he will say the best way to get booked is to give a great speech. So a lot of these workshops, people talk about marketing, and I know somebody's going to talk about LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is important. But if you get booked and you don't give a great speech, you will never get booked again. Right? Think about it this way. If you give a great speech and 2 people come up after the event and said, that was brilliant, can I book you for our conference? Now you've gone from 1 speech to 2. If you then do those 2 speeches and you do 2 great speeches and 2 people come up at each after that, you've now gone from 2 to 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 100 and whatever, and you are fully booked. So a key thing to answer a lot of the marketing questions is do a great speech. And one of the ways to do a great speech, of course, is to feed what the audience needs. Now, that's hard when it's a non-homogeneous audience. And at a speaker's convention, you've got brand newbies, just as we have today, people who are just checking out PSA Spain and going, is there any value here? And there are people who are super experienced, and I'm not going to name anybody here, but Ian and Bob, you're on the call here and you're sitting back and go, I know this, how hard can it be? But you've also got to give something of value to them. So it's not an easy gig to do. So the starting point of giving that vulnerability and saying, here's where I started to learn, takes them on the journey. So very good observation. Thank you, Kim. I missed one up here. Hang on. Connecting with the audience, you're one of them at the same time, same moment, having coffee. Now, I will share one of my key secrets on the coffee, right? And I think I saw somebody else said that there was painting a picture, use of multi-sensory language. So all the NLP trained people are going, oh yeah, that was kinesthetic, that was olfactory, that was auditory digital, you shared your inner dialogue, you ticked all the boxes. And yes, I did. And that was intentional. Because a great story transports you to the place. It is transformational. And so if you're going to start a story, always think about time, place, and emotion. There I was back in, wherever that was, 1999, 2000. Where was I? I was in a coffee shop. And then I paint that picture, and we've all been in a coffee shop, we've all smelt it, our brain fills in all the details, everybody's on the same page, all right? Fantastic. So somebody's just chatting to people in the chat. So before I move on, any other observations anybody would like to make about why I did that and how I did that? All right. No? I mean, if you look really closely, there's a picture of me with hair there. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Go. Yes.
This is Cyril. I'd like to know the use of silence, because I know that silence has a huge power during a keynote. Can you explain how do you use your moment of silence during your speech?
Oh, sorry. I was just practicing being silent there. Cyril, it is a great observation. Did you notice my use of pause in those few minutes? Yeah. And so you can answer your own question here. What was the impact to you as an observer? Even though that's nearly 3 years old, that video, right? And it was in a different place at a different time. What was the impact of the silence on you?
The impact for me of this silence enabled to reach not only the message, but the body and the emotion.
Yes.
And to reach and to connect to my story, my challenges, my devo whatsoever. Very
good. So I pause a lot. And I had, when I went to training early in my career, I did all the NLP thing. I became a master trainer of NLP. I studied hypnosis. I studied under Michael Grinder, who is John Grinder's brother, one of the co-founders of NLP, who went into teaching educators how to educate. And I really learned how to create a cadence of what I wanted to say with my gestures, with my pauses, and that is now a mind-to-muscle activity for me. I naturally speak quite quickly, right? So for those of you that English is not your first language, I apologize. However, as long as I speak clearly and I pause periodically, people's brains have time to catch up. More importantly, my brain has time to catch up, right? So I get an opportunity during the pause to breathe. How can we connect with an audience if we don't breathe, right? The audience is this breathing entity, this organism, whether it's 5 people, 5,000, 50,000 people, the audience is breathing with you. If you don't breathe, the audience can't breathe. And we've all sat in a speech with somebody who is just talking and talking and talking, and they are so excited, and they want to tell you everything they know, and you think that and you're worried that if they don't take a breath soon, they're going to blow. But because we are in connection, the audience can't breathe. So I take a pause, I take a breath. It allows me to focus on the audience. What are they hearing? What's happening? What's resonating? And really, what am I going to say next? So I never panic what's coming next because my brain is running faster than my mouth anyway. So by pausing, I know I can choose the next thing to say, and there are no ums and ahs and verbal fluff because the pause, I'm ready to say what I'm going to say next. Does that answer your question, Cyril?
Perfect. Thanks. Super, super interesting. The idea of a breathing connection between you and the audience. I love it.
That's right. Well, we are inspirational speakers, and the Latin inspiration, of course, means to take a breath in, right? To inspire. All righty. Now, some of you, Jessica invited me to speak to the Virtual Speakers Association, and I shared with them the Dunning-Kruger effect. And if you haven't heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where we are ignorant of our own ignorance. We are unaware of what we don't know. And I shared the Dunning-Kruger effect on that. And if you're a member of the VSAI, you can watch that. I think, Charlotte, you even attended that. So I'm not going to bore you with the Dunning-Kruger effect. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to map my journey as a speaker with the Dunning-Kruger effect. So the Dunning-Kruger effect starts with low experience, high confidence. And that's where I was at the beginning of my journey. I had seen a speaker. Right? The speaker I'd seen was Dr. John Tickell, and he spoke at this conference. He was a doctor. At that time, I was a physiotherapist. I didn't know that medical professionals were allowed to give speeches. I saw him, and he gave this really insightful speech based on a book that he'd written, everything in moderation except fish, vegetables, and sex, which was an amazingly catchy title. Of course, don't do all of them at the same time. It gets very messy. So I saw him and I met him in the corridor and I said, wow, that was amazing. He said, thank you very much. I said, did they pay you for that? He said, oh yeah, they paid me a lot of money for that. And I'm like, oh yeah, how hard could it be? I want to do that. So this picture here is 1999 when I joined the National Speakers Association of Australia, NSAA, which is now PSA Australia. It's changed its name. So here I am looking very serious with my hair and my suit and Yorick, of course, the skull, and alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. So I'm looking very theatrical there, and I'd had the professional shot done. That went in the NSAA directory, and I thought, how hard could it be? I'm going to be a professional speaker. Speakers bureaus are going to book me, and I'm going to be rich. Well, did that happen? Yeah, not quite as easy as that. Because what happens when we start an endeavor, high on confidence, low on experience, whether that's learning to downhill ski, a photography class, learning to play a musical instrument, after we get a bit of experience, we realize there's more to it than we thought. Now, luckily, I got some momentum. I created my company, Self-Leadership International, and registered that in 1999. At that time, I was living in Perth, Western Australia. There was nothing international about me at all, but the international was intentional. And this speech is technically about how to become an international speaker. Well, firstly, set an intent that you want to be international. I know speakers that are very happy where they are. I know speakers that actually don't even travel out of one city. There's one speaker I know, very successful, doesn't leave Sydney. All right. So I set up Self-Leadership International, and I did that. And then, of course, with the Dunning-Kruger effect, as our confidence wanes and we're not being booked and we're really struggling, we go through the valley of despair, and we lose a lot of members for speaking associations because they join an association, they feel the love from other speakers with an abundance, sharing their experience as I am, and they go, I want to be part of that. But then they go, well, I'm not getting booked. Why aren't the speakers bureaus booking me? What the hell is happening? Right? Now, the answer to that question I already actually gave you, which is my first speech. Nobody was going to book me, so I booked myself. Speakers bureaus don't book you if you've never done a speech. It's not going to happen. They're not going to rescue you. Nobody is coming on a white horse to rescue you. But then you climb up what I call, or rather the Dunning-Kruger effect calls, the slope of enlightenment. And in 2003, after running some public workshops on NLP, I had an attendee from Singapore. And he said, you're really good at this. And I said, well, thank you very much. He said, have you ever thought of coming to Singapore? I thought, no, I have not. And he said, well, I know how to put an event together. I will put an event together, bring you to Singapore, and we'll share the profits. And I said, great. Meantime, my inner dialogue is saying, I hope there's profits, because if there's a loss, I can't afford to pay him. But at that first workshop in Singapore, a trainer from Singapore Airlines was in attendance. She went back and her scores as a trainer went through the roof using some of the technologies that I'd shared with her that I had previously learned from other speakers. And so Singapore Airlines engaged me to teach leadership and coaching for their airport managers around the world, from London and New York and Melbourne and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I traveled up to Singapore in 2003 and in fact moved to Singapore in 2004. Now, having one signature client in Singapore, if you're going to have one, Singapore Airlines is the one. It's the national carrier. Everybody knows it. It's fabulous. And so whenever I picked up the phone to talk to somebody and say, you need to hire me, they'd say, who have you worked with before? And I'd say, well, Singapore Airlines. And they'd say, okay, come in for the meeting. So one of the secrets of going global is get a global client who is going to fly you to different locations. Because once I worked with Singapore Airlines in Singapore, they flew me to London and Amsterdam and New York, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, always at the front of the plane. That's a good client to have. All right. And so one of the biggest key is to find that key client that will take you to multiple destinations. That's the great way. And every destination, of course, I made sure I phoned everybody up that I knew in that and said, hey, I'm speaking in this area. Can I meet you, et cetera, et cetera. And I allowed Singapore Airlines to fund my marketing excursions. They did actually get a bit stroppy about that. And in fact, I lost them as a client over this very issue, but by which time I built a network and it didn't matter. So then I move up the slope of enlightenment. I get my certified speaking professional. By this time, I fully moved to Singapore and I joined the Singapore Association. And unfortunately, I missed the Global Speakers Federation first convention in Singapore. I was there. I'd never heard of it. But when I joined, they said, oh, well, you know, you have to fill in your professional association criteria. And I said, well, I was a professional speaker in Australia. They said, no, it doesn't count. You have to fill in the paperwork. I hate paperwork. And I went, well, how much paperwork is there to do the CSP? And they said, well, we don't know. You have to do that through the US or Australia. So I got the paperwork from Australia. I went, if I'm going to fill in the professional criteria, I might as well go whole hog and get my certified speaking professional. Singapore now, and it's probably got the most CSPs per head of associate membership than anywhere in the world. I was number 2. David Lim was the first. The mountaineer went up Mount Everest. I was number 2, and then I think we have 17, 18 CSPs in an association of 110, 120 people. So it's growing. So Certified Speaking Professional is your ISO 9000. It means that you have subject matter expertise. It means that you've got ethics. It means that you've got clients. It means that you've kind of got a process. And if you want to know about that, as I said, the VSA I speech, that's on my YouTube channel, which is, you just search me on YouTube, or you can go the shortcut selfleadership.tv. And I talk about a moment, a message, a methodology, and a market in terms of how you expand that. So I got my CSP. In 2012, I published my second book, but my first book on the topic that really was what I'm all about, which was self-leadership. I co-authored this book with Dr. Ana Kazan. Interesting story. Ana is from Brazil. I'm married to a Brazilian, but Ana and I have never physically met. Right? When I go to Brazil, I go to Rio. She's from Sao Paulo. We co-authored a book back in 2011, because the book was written then, and we never met. And so, you know, this virtual collaboration, we were ahead of our time. People are doing that. It's good to write a book with somebody else. My first book was written with a female author as well. And I find the iron sharpens iron, as it says biblically, brings you together and you mash out ideas, and they're much better when you write them yourself. I've got a new book coming out this year. I've written it myself, but I hired professional editors to challenge me to make it better. So key for me here was getting a book that owns the area of expertise. I did not invent self-leadership. Honestly, I thought I did back in 1999 when I was speaking about it, but Charles Mance wrote about it in 1987, so I can't claim origin. But when you Google the definition of self-leadership, you get me and this book. And so that establishes my credibility. I also published this with a New York publisher. They offered me to have a Singapore publisher. I said, no, I want a New York publisher. Now, I make no money out of this book, right? The royalties on this is tiny, right? If you want to make money out of a book, it has to be an ecosystem, and I'll talk to you about that if we have time. But I wanted to establish my credibility. This is my PhD, right? It's a solid book. It's written with a PhD. It's got research. And we tried to bring everything we knew about self-leadership into one book. Now, subsequently, I've learned a lot more. That was 2012. But this, you know, for you starting out, you don't have to write a book straight away, but aim to get your ideas into a book. Now, look at that timeline. It's 1999 all the way to 2012. I didn't do it straight away. So when you do write a book, make sure it's substantive. Make sure there's something in there that really identifies you. And it's not just you can publish a book of quotes if you want. I have no problem with that. But it's not going to get you that market segment that many of you were asking me about. I'll just finish this little curve and then I'll take questions, as I'm sure this is generating some questions. 2015, 2016, I became the president of Asia Professional Speakers Singapore. I didn't need to be the president. Some people want to be the president of an association because they want the visibility. That is the wrong reason to do it, in my opinion. I was already a CSP. I wasn't an up-and-coming speaker. I was tapped on the shoulder by Global, and they said, come on, self-leadership needs some leadership. You're the leadership guy. Come and do this. And I'm like, I need this like a hole in the head. Actually, I did need it. It was really hard work. I changed the branding. I changed the constitution, did a whole bunch. I built the website with media. I had a big year. I had a big year because I put a big team around me, and it was great to be back working with a team of volunteers. It was great working with a constituency that, frankly, was like herding cats on cocaine. If you're going to talk about leadership, lead a voluntary association, and it will test your mettle as a leader. All right. So I learned a great deal of humility in 2015, 2016. People say to me, you are a much better person afterwards. I said, well, you just didn't know me before. You knew a version of me before. But it allowed me to be much more vulnerable and consider other people's perspective. So in terms of paying it forwards into an association, I highly recommend it. You will actually gain a lot. You'll burn a lot of time. And, Jessica, she's left now, but I can see what Jessica's doing. This woman will have huge success because of the contributions she's making now, because of the connections she's making. Everybody's going to know who Jessica is if they don't already. And so that's actually a model to follow. Being a president of Asia Professional, it means when I go to any convention, I spoke at Charlotte, I spoke for you guys down in South Africa. When I go into the United States, big convention, but as a president, I always get invited to the top table with the president of the US. And that means I immediately network with the cool kids. Now, if you've ever been to a nightclub and you've been frustrated by the velvet rope, it's nice to be on the other side of the velvet rope. If you've ever been in the VIP center, particularly if it's free booze, that's the best spot to be. So when you contribute, there are some benefits. So I'd highly recommend building PSA Spain so that you get invited to the top table. And this is me in 2019 in Kazan in Russia. I am the keynote speaker at the Islamic Leadership Conference, 4,000 people. I am not a Muslim, and I'm talking to a whole bunch of Muslim leaders. I facilitate a panel with crown princes and prime ministers of Kazan, and it is just a career pinnacle. It was super. It was taken there by a bureau, and I thought I had arrived. But the thing about the Dunning-Kruger effect, as I said, starts high confidence, goes through the valley of despair, climbs up the slope of alignment, and you get to this point, of a plateau of sustainability where you think, trust me, it's more complicated than you think, right? I wanted to share something with you that wherever you map this, there are ups and downs, because between writing the book and just before becoming the president, I went through a very painful divorce, and I was a single dad for a period of time. And so when some of the people say to me, oh, you're much nicer now, well, there's a reason I was much nicer now, and there's a reason why I was a little bit more grumpy when they knew me, because now I met the love of my life, the beautiful Andrea. I got remarried. I'm now a stepdad. And I found a woman that challenged me to be the best version of me. So you're always going to have ups and downs professionally and personally. The question is how you handle them. So this was my Dunning-Kruger effect, my roller coaster. I share this with you not to brag. I share this with you to give you hope. Wherever you are, if you're at the top of the pinnacle, if you're traveling to capital cities and meeting crown princes, trust me, there can still be a downer on the other side, because we all know what happened after 2019. 2020 came. And I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. But I want you to take faith. I took ages to write my seminal work. I've subsequently written other books that back that up. But it took me a long time. I changed countries, made mistakes. So I'm sharing this to say, wherever you are on the journey, you can kind of map it, but if you persist, if you work through it, then there's something on the other side. So that's the inspirational part of my story, only to share with you what you could take. Any questions before I move on to the next section?
I have a question, Andrew.
And who's saying that? Cyril again.
So, Peter, can you hear me?
Cyril, by the way, you're not muted, I think. So Peter, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. No. I mean, thanks for the Dunning-Kruger curve. That's an interesting journey. One. I think I'm going to rob your idea. That it's a very good way to map out a life journey. You talk about speaking here, but you obviously give workshops, and I think you're a coach as well.
Yeah.
Right. Can you give us an idea on this journey? How did it work for you? Did you sort of set out to be a speaker, and then the workshops sort of came as you went through that journey, or were the workshops there first, then you became the speaker? The coaching, was that at the beginning? Was that in the middle? How did you sort of mix that together? And on that today, how much time do you dedicate to each of those sort of fields, more or less? How do you mix it?
I'm happy to answer the question, but my question to you is, how is that important to you? How does my percentage inform any of your decisions? Do you mind if I ask that question first?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because I started off aiming to be a speaker,
Yeah.
so a paid professional speaker, and I've actually got into coaching off the back of that. Because when I've given speeches, I've had people come up to me and say, I'd be interested to speak to you offline and then maybe get coached. And so I've actually started to become an executive coach off the back of it. So I'm now in that sort of space where I'm using the speaking gigs to get coaching clients, right? So I'm just interested to see how you did it.
Yeah.
So for me, it would be interesting to know what you...
Well, I trained as a coach first, but I wanted to be a speaker, right? Because keynote speaking is the sexy end of speaking. You get flown in front of the plane, you get picked up in a limo, stay in a nice hotel. On Saturday, I'm flying to do a speech in Denver, Colorado. Right, so it's back, and we're doing that. I'm getting paid a lot of money to get on a plane and give a speech, and it's awesome. However, because I was always a coach, I always looked at speaking as a transformational act, not an entertainment act. And that actually made me a little bit difficult to be booked by speakers bureaus, because speakers bureaus say, well, what do you speak about? And I go, well, my topic's self-leadership, but it depends on what the needs of the audience are. Because both my first training in physiotherapy and then my training as a coach, my mindset is prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And so I'm always, what is the problem I'm solving? Now, this is really important from business. Anybody who's a business consultant knows we get paid as relevant to the problem we solve. So what is a speech? Well, a speech really most of the time is corporate entertainment. Right? They get in a speaker at a convention because, everybody's happy and inspired, but it doesn't really change anything. And I love to change. My personal identifier is that I am a catalyst for change. If nothing changes, then I might as well not have turned up. I could have phoned it in. So for me, speaking and coaching and workshops are really all different vehicles to achieve the same thing, which is transformation. Transformation is a key value for me. So the modality in which I create the transformation depends. So initially, all my marketing for years was focused on speaking, not on coaching. And yet the speaking, as you discovered, drives the coaching. And I did have the methodology and the ability to do that. Now that COVID is here, obviously coaching is a huge part of the work that I do. I could move to Portugal because I moved all my coaching clients online. And I also then, with people being comfortable online, moved my business from B2B, being hired by, the big software companies or finance companies, as a coach for their senior executives, that I can now make my services available to anybody that wants to hire me. And I have a whole sales funnel for people who want to get into the C-suite. Because I coach C-suite executives, I can coach people to become C-suite executives because I know the difference between the person that bounces up. So again, I'm being paid for the transformation. Because if you move from senior VP at 150 to 200 grand a year to C-level at 250 to 350 plus stock options, then whatever I charge is irrelevant. So the thing that most speakers fail to understand, and this is my fireside chat piece, is whether you're speaking or coaching or doing a workshop, whatever, you're writing a book, is you are paid in proportion to the transformation that you make. And it took me years to learn that. And if you learn that from me today, you owe me a percentage of everything you earn from here on in. You're not going to pay it, but you owe it to me. Do you understand? Okay, somebody's phone is going. Awesome.
That's mine. Thanks very much.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Let's move on. So 2020 to now, I started to answer that, right? So I'd already started doing virtual speeches in 2018, 2019. 2020 hit, I already had a studio set up, as you can see, I can be anywhere. I mean, we said we were going to make this a fireside chat, so, I can bring you to my fireside, but let's just take you back to here for a moment. And the slides is that I moved my business online. Anybody that was taking a workshop, I changed the workshop from 9 till 5 to 3 sessions of 45 minutes, right? Sorry, 3 sessions of 90 minutes. So, and they'd say, do we get a discount? I said, no, on the contrary, I'm not going to charge you more for transferring this to a digital format. The other thing that this does is everything I do, I press record at my end, right? So I'm running this through Open Broadcast Studio, so I will have a recording of this. So if I said something really clever at some point today, I can edit that and that can go on my YouTube channel. And I have that. So every lecture I've done for every university then went into a library, an online library. So my coaching clients, they don't just get my time, they can watch all my lectures and it's behind a paywall. So if they're already paying me, they have access to it and we can do a flipped classroom. I can say, hey, you want to learn about storytelling? Hey, watch my lecture on storytelling to XYZ University, and then we'll have our coaching session. And so the power of transformation is multiplied. So for me, to some extent, COVID was a gift because it got people to stop saying, oh, we have to do it in person. And there. The downside, of course, is it's got very crowded and that every man and his dog is online. So a question that was asked is, how do we differentiate ourselves? Well, that's through branding, online, right? So in 2016, I wrote a smaller book of the 2012 book. Always repurpose your content. Why? Because a marketing buddy of mine read my book and he said, hey, your book's brilliant. I said, thank you. He said, but it's hard to read. And I said, well, thank you, I think. He said, have you thought about writing an easy one? I said, yeah. He said, if you can get it to me by Saturday, I can get my guy to mock up the graphics for you for nothing. And I said, well, today's Tuesday. So in 3 days, I wrote a book and I delivered it. And that became an Amazon bestseller because we put it up there for $1.99 and it sold like hotcakes. And I got the Amazon bestseller thing. And now I can use it as clickbait. I can give it away. I self-published this. So I went from being published by a publishing house to self-publishing. It's on-demand printing through that goes to Amazon. I get a check every month from the on-demand printing and from Amazon for that, and it sets me up. And it's an easy giveaway. If I do a speech, I say, it cost me it cost me about $1.50 to print it. And I can say to a client, so, okay, you got 500 people at this conference, you want to pay me this. Would you like a book in everybody's hand? And they go, oh yeah, I love that, but how much is that? And I go, well, I'll tell you what, you can have it for $9, right? So then I get an extra, $7.50 to everybody in the audience, thank you very much. And I just doubled my fee, or tripled my fee. So FYI. So online. And again, I talk a bit more about my funnels. If you go to my YouTube channel, and please subscribe because I'm wanting to crank up my numbers of subscribers. So selfleadership.tv. I actually have a playlist on professional speaking and virtual speaking where I talk about the funnel and how I build that. I don't want to do that tonight, but that's what took me here. So then I moved to Portugal. This has been a big year, as Jessica said. Had a big cancer scare in May, and they took out a third of my bowel in June, and then at the end of June I moved to Portugal, And so I basically didn't work much the last 6 months. I finished off a book and I ate and drank in Portugal, and I'm now having dry January to walk my talk as a self-leader, because otherwise it would just not really go there. So I'm loving Portugal. I'm loving the fact that I can still fly off, work with my US clients. I've been to Sweden, I've been to France, I've been to Spain since I arrived here, spoke to the Swedish Association, and they're really cool up there because they don't care about COVID, and everybody gave me a hug, and I'm like, oh, you're touching me, you're touching me. I haven't been touched in ages. So that was cool. This is the book that's coming out this quarter, this time. So I've done published by a New York publisher. I've done self-publishing. This is what's called independent publishing. Well, I actually pay these guys to design the book cover, to run the editing, and do some of the launch for me. And so that creates a professional product. And again, this will become part of an ecosystem where I will sell the book, but I will also sell the book to every manager in the company with a workshop, with a speech, with some coaching. So it becomes an ecosystem. So I'm wanting to make a $100,000, $200,000 sale rather than a $10,000 speech or a $10 book. So I wrote the book specifically for that need. How do I know it was a need? Because one of my clients said, could you write a book for us for our managers? You work with our senior leaders. We need a book for our first-time managers. Could you do that? And I said, I could. How much have you got? And they said, we've got this much. And I said, it's not enough for the time it's going to take me. And they said, oh, by the way, we want some workshops too. I said, how many workshops do you want? They said, 6. I said, I tell you what, I'll do you a deal. You pay my full fee for 6 workshops. I'll write the book as part of the back end for the workshops, but I keep the IP so I can publish it myself. And they said, absolutely fine. That negotiation meant I got paid full fee for 6 workshops. I wrote the book. They helped me because they gave me some case studies, and I now have all the content for a book. Bang. So do you understand that when you've been in this business for a while, you're not only thinking about what transformation you're making for the client, but what leverage you can make for yourself. Because I'm now 60. I turned 60 in August here, and I'm loving life. The next 10 years are going to be the most productive of my life. And so I'm on full intent to leverage every moment of every day and maximize that. So I share that with you. This is my LinkedIn profile. You can connect with me there. But we have a little bit more time. I think we have about 10 minutes, if I calculate correctly, for a fireside chat. So I've shared a bunch of ideas for people who are brand new, in the middle, and at the top of their career. What can I share with you to make today of value to you?